Hey, welcome back, or at least I hope so, because this is part 2 of my way too deep dive on the Kingdom Hearts 2 novelization. This video is going to cover volumes 3 and 4 from the Battle of 1000 Heartless to the end of the game. I would recommend watching part 1 if you missed it, but of course I'd recommend that because that means I get 2 views instead of 1. And let me just keep pushing my luck, if you did see part 1 and enjoyed it, give part 2 a like, because I promise it's going to be just like the first video. It would help me out because I know the novel videos are a bit more niche, and I certainly didn't intend for this project to take this long, so thank you for bearing with me. Before we get into the novel proper, I've got some housekeeping from part 1 to tend to. First, and I'm embarrassed by this, but at the end of volume 1, I talk about this weird little poem type thing and assumed it was invented for the novel, but this was, in fact, pulled from Yen Sid's big boring book that you can read in the Mysterious Tower. In fairness, my eyes have done little more than glaze over that text since 2006, but that was my bad for not recognizing it. Second, and this is a bit more all-encompassing, but it should definitely be noted that some, maybe even most of the dialogue changes I highlight are not necessarily changes from the game to the novel, but changes from Japanese to English. I am not personally familiar with the Japanese script of KH2 on account of being a shameful monoglot, so I'm not picking up on the translation differences. Still, I'm assuming most of you are in the same boat as me as far as that's concerned, so I think we're all still learning something new about the game when I point these changes out. That should cover all the old business, so let's get back into the book. Nothing really noteworthy with the character bios this time, but the art is fun, so here's some of that. Naminé's like, can you all fucking relax? I'm trying to draw here. Unlike the first 2 volumes, which had prologues, the 3rd volume jumps straight into a proper chapter 1 called Confrontation, and we pick right back up where we left off with the gang running out of Ansem's study to see what's going on outside. But within half a page, we actually get back to where we last saw Riku talking to Maleficent. Before we get into their conversation, the narration notes that this place they're standing in was once called Radiant Garden, which is an obviously way earlier drop of Hollow Bastion's original name than when it happens in-game. So, you are alive, Riku. And you're back from the dead, like I thought. I don't know, that's my Ansem Riku voice this time, I guess. Maleficent explains that like the darkness itself, she cannot be vanquished. She asks if Riku is the same, stating that despite changing his form, he can't change his heart. The narration notes that the scent particular to human beings could not be hidden so easily, but that Maleficent's magic allowed her to see that this person has Riku's heart. Riku asks if she knows about Organization 13. I have heard of it, those fellows in the black cloaks like yours. Riku nods, and the nobodies. Maleficent doesn't seem to know what nobodies are, but Riku explains that they're those weird white creatures, which is how I've been described before as well. The castle then rumbles, likely the same noise that SDG heard, and Riku runs off to fight, warning Maleficent that she should fight too if she doesn't want to lose the castle. Maleficent wonders to herself what Riku might be after when Pete runs in, warning her that the white creatures have made their way inside and Maleficent readies to fight them. We shift over to a hooded man in Ansem's computer room, and I'm thinking that we're getting that final mix Xemnas scene here, but the guy pushes his hood back and it's Axel, so this is completely new. He's looking at the screen and gets deja vu, with the narration noting that it looked a lot like the computer in the organization headquarters. Axel then hears a voice behind him asking what he's doing here, and it turns out to be Riku. Don't scare me like that, okay? I got people after me, you know. Well, if so, you should be a little more cautious. You're weak anyway. What? Hey, I just let my guard down for— So this is Ansem's computer. Who's the man in the picture? Beats me. I thought someone in the organization would be more help. I'm not in the organization. Riku does some typing on the computer and discovers that the man on the screen is the real Ansem. As Riku ponders this, Axel realizes that this screen looks like the one in Twilight Town, though this one looked less advanced as if it was the Twilight Town computer's predecessor. He goes on to say that the screens have the same layout and functions and that this one manages Hollow Bastion while the other manages Twilight Town. There's no way anyone else could have designed this. It has to mean they both have the same creator. Axel then wonders where the real Ansem went, and Riku responds, there is one person whose true identity we don't know. And we've got a lot of new stuff front-loaded here because we now join up with Naminé in the White Room. She came back here after Axel told her to hunker down in the mansion back in Volume 2. The narration notes that she hasn't left the White Room since she got back to Twilight Town and that she's only been sitting in here drawing pictures and praying. I didn't know Naminé was religious like that. I hope she worships at the altar of Jabib. Naminé is on edge though because she senses a presence in the basement lab. She musters up the courage to make her way down to the basement where she finds Diz, who muses that he thought Naminé left with Riku. Naminé asks why Diz returned, and Diz replies he could ask her the same thing. He then offers her a sea salt ice cream, which, given his previous conduct, was not exactly what I expected here. Naminé nervously accepts it, but I'm yelling at the book, "Don't eat it, Naminé! That's rat poison!" Diz is impressed that Sora was able to infiltrate Space Paranoids and restore the modified program to normal. Naminé asks if Diz is a good guy or a bad guy, and he says, "I can't answer that myself." That's bad guy, we count those. Diz then remembers he has another gift for Naminé, a photo depicting Roxas and HPO. Diz announces his departure before letting Naminé know that there's a freezer here with a bunch of sea salt ice cream inside and that she can have as much as she wants or to share it with anyone else. Really tickled by the idea of Ansem the Wise having a secret ice cream stockpile. Naminé is left there feeling perplexed, unsure what to make of any of that. She thinks to herself, Roxas had to disappear, I know that. I understand it, but something inside me makes me reject that. Did he really have to disappear? Naminé finally takes a bite of her ice cream and comments, "It's salty, but sweet." She said the line! We finally rejoin STG, who arrive in the corridors where Maleficent and Pete are watching the Heartless vs. Nobody battle before they vanish and leave the trio to fight both groups. Donald, not missing a beat, kicks off the battle with 2 fire spells before we change perspectives again to the Final Fantasy crew outside the castle. This is kind of a mishmash of different scenes that, in the game, play out in rapid fire right before the Demyx battle. Leon, Yuffie, and Aerith are actually battling nobodies here instead of Heartless like in the game. As Yuffie and Aerith fight what's described as throngs of nobodies pouring from the castle, Yuffie gets knocked down and Aerith gives her a potion. I guess she was an MP charge. Aerith thinks to herself that now would be a good time for him to show up, and speak of the devil, Cloud shows up, cutting through crowds of nobodies. This bleeds right into the 80s action movie moment with Cloud and Leon, and we cut away from the action after they leap into battle. And we have yet another new scene here, with Axel and Riku standing at the cliff by the postern, looking down as the FF characters fight the nobodies below. Axel asks Riku what he's going to do, and Riku asks, "What about you?" Axel responds, "I'm not telling," which is clearly an old standby of his.
I'm not telling. Tell us!
Riku says he's going to try and help Sora and the gang. Before he can leap down to provide his assistance, Mickey shows up, saying he's glad he finally found him. Mickey looks at Axel suspiciously, asking, "Oh, who are you?" "Axel," he replies, mildly annoyed. "Got it memorized?" Really playing the hits today. Mickey deduces that Axel is a member of the organization, but Riku points out that he betrayed them. Mickey asks, "Oh, is he on our side?" And Axel interjects, "No idea," which I thought was funny. Riku concurs that he's not sure whose side he's on. Mickey's like, "But you're friends!" To which Axel responds, "Nobodies don't have friends," which obviously a fucking lie, but nobody can dispute this in the moment. Mickey tells Riku that Sora is looking for him and really wants to see him, but Riku says, "Well, I don't want to see him." He's probably just still sore over losing that Destiny Islands duel. Mickey is bummed out by this, but Riku reminds him of the promise he made. Riku then asks if Mickey's been able to find out where Ansem the Wise might be, but Mickey doesn't have any concrete answers, just that he feels his presence. Axel chimes in to ask if this happened to be in Twilight Town, to which Mickey says it was. This leads Axel to believe that Naminé may be in danger, which, yeah, being pre-diabetic, she's left all this fucking ice cream. Riku tells Mickey that he'll go to Twilight Town in search of Ansem, leaving Mickey and Axel alone, which is just weird. It's like, I don't know, a scene with just Sandy and Mr. Krabs. I don't know if they've done that yet. Mickey asks what Axel's gonna do next, and Axel's like, Mickey says he's getting a good whiff of a friend of his from Axel, so maybe Mickey is where Riku learned to be such a sniffer in Chain of Memories. Axel questions if he's smelly before realizing Mickey's talking about Pluto. Happy to hear this, Mickey shakes Axel's hand while Axel mumbles, "I mean, I've had a shower since then." Once again, Mickey asks Axel what his next step is, and Axel says he wants to tell Sora that he's sorry. Mickey asks if Axel is a nobody, and I couldn't believe the gall of what comes next. Axel nods in agreement and says, "So I can't destroy other nobodies." The narration states, unless he was actually in danger, Axel couldn't fight nobodies, not when he was one himself. He didn't want to make them disappear. I think Vexen and Zexion would beg to fucking differ. This is wild considering the Calm novel covered their deaths without any hand-wringing from Axel, so I don't know what the deal is here. Ignoring that obvious bullshit, Mickey says he'd like to get Sora and the others off this world, preferably soon. He says he's not sure if they should be fighting the organization, and Axel asks, "What about the Heartless? Don't you have to fight them too?" Mickey asks Axel to clarify, but before he can, Mickey notices SDG leaving the postern and leaps down to join them. The trio enters the Bailey, seeing a massive swarm of nobodies approaching them, which I guess was maybe meant to be depicted in this cutscene here. Mickey descends from the heavens, and that scene plays out the same, except at the end, Mickey mumbles to himself, "Fiddlesticks!" which is a change from the original Japanese in the game, where he says, "Those motherfuckers!" The scene continues a little longer, with Axel showing up behind Mickey. "Kind of a handful, aren't they? And somebody from the organization's about to make an appearance too." Worried by this, Mickey tries to chase after SDG, but Axel stops him and tells him not to worry because, quote, "Those three can handle him." We zip back on over to Twilight Town to rejoin Naminé, who's in the computer room when she's joined by Riku, out of breath and asking if Diz is here. Naminé says he left, wondering how Riku knew he was here. Riku turns his attention to the computers, explaining that there's a good chance that the same person designed the one here and the one in Hollow Bastion, eventually leading them to the conclusion that since Ansem the Wise made the one there, and Diz made the one here, they're one and the same. Naminé is surprised to learn this and shows Riku what Diz gave her. This prompts Riku to enter the password on the computer. Naminé comments that the last time she saw him, Diz didn't seem as cold as he usually does, or, as likely to throw her to the fucking floor. She asks Riku if he wants a bite of ice cream, which he surprisingly accepts. You'd think the shame of looking like Ansem SOD would bar you from eating dessert. Riku, of course, comments that it's salty, but kind of sweet. Riku ponders if Diz intends for Naminé to get the ice cream and photo to Sora as a hint pointing to the old mansion. Naminé agrees, thinking Diz, or rather Ansem the Wise, might have a plan. Riku asks if there's anything she hasn't been telling him, and she responds, "I'm not sure of it yet. The secrets of the heart aren't something I can talk about, not yet." Back with SDG, again the novel injects this big swarm of nobodies that isn't present in the game, which the trio attempts to charge into before being intercepted by Demyx. The pre-fight cutscene plays out pretty much the same, though the dialogue continues a bit once the battle begins. Sora asks who this so-called traitor is, and Demyx responds, ever the poet, "Traitors are traitors!" He attacks SDG with his water clones, and Donald responds by shooting out a fire and blizzard spell. The gang takes care of the clones, but Demyx blocks himself off with his big geyser walls, which Goofy declares to be cheating. Demyx responds, "I don't see how." And holy shit, it took until the third volume, but Donald casts Thunder, canceling out one of Demyx's water jets. Sora and Demyx both leap into the air to attack each other, and Demyx, channeling Hades, quips, "Having fun yet?" And Sora, channeling KH1 text bubble Donald, replies, "Not really." Sora slams down with a Keyblade strike and sends Demyx to the floor. He lets out his usual death cry of, "No way!" To which Sora responds, "Yes way!" Fucking got him! The trio is joined by Mickey. The Rock nails Goofy in the head like usual, but instead of Donald's line about being sorry about the ice cream, he says, "Goofy, it's time for dinner!" Again, it might be in the original Japanese game script, I don't know. Amidst his lines of mourning, Sora comments, "You've gotta be kidding, right?" Echoing what many of us thought when we first saw this scene. And that's what ends our first chapter of Volume 3, which was titled Tears of Nobody, as in nobody was convinced to shed tears over this untimely Goofy death. That takes us to Chapter 2, titled Under the World, which, no, does not take us back to the Underworld in Olympus. We actually begin with a short segment from Xemnas' perspective, somewhere in the world it never was, where he's making eyes at the moon like usual. Xemnas reflects on his plans as leader of the organization, and the narration actually provides the first Xehanort name drop here. The present, the past, the future. Human, heartless, nobody. Xehanort, Ansem, Xemnas. Mostly just kind of a weird poem-y thing, but sure. He actually wonders if the fallen members, including Roxas, bear a grudge against him, but then concludes that they were nobodies who have no hearts with which to hold any ill will. So that obviously goes a bit against the in-game reality of Xemnas knowing the truth about nobodies having the potential to grow hearts, but this was also written before the full reveal. Xemnas' final thought here is wondering if, quote, that little king remembers him. We briefly rejoin Sora cutting through Heartless as he realizes that he's lost sight of Donald and Mickey, which I guess gives a reason as to why he's all alone in-game. They just got too far ahead and separated. Gotta point out this line. He couldn't see Donald or King Mickey anymore. Where did they get to? Or Goofy, who would never wake up again. Right after that, we cut to what I guess is sort of an extension of Mickey's flashback when he sees Xemnas and the Great Maw in the game. The narration explains how Ansem the Wise was this world's leader, while his 6 apprentices worked with him carrying out experiments. His apprentices numbered 6, Xehanort, Evan, Ienzo, Braig, Dylan, and Alias, and each one was brilliant in his own way. Really? Even Alias?
Don't mock me!
Ansem, however, had only one objective, to uncover the secrets of the darkness in the heart. With Evan's assistance, Ansem performed a little experiment on Xehanort. It was meant to awaken the memory sleeping in Xehanort's heart. The narration then explains that at some point, the research slipped from Ansem's control and the apprentices found their own subjects to experiment on, doing so in an enormous laboratory built under Ienzo's direction. We get a glimpse of a short scene of Ansem essentially scolding all 6 of the apprentices in his study, not just Xehanort like in the game. Xehanort persists that the truth of the worlds is out there, but Ansem declares that no one will be opening the door to darkness. He was a little too late though, as they already had, marked by a meteor shower raining down on Radiant Garden. There was no doubt Ansem himself had led to all of this as the one who'd begun the experiments. He tried to think what he could do to correct this grave mistake, and that was when it happened. We cut away. And I continue to be surprised by these new scenes because we switch over to, you guessed it, Goofy's corpse. Well, not just Goofy's corpse, but Axel standing over him. Hello? Come on, get up already. He pokes Goofy's cheek. Seriously, for a king, that guy sure doesn't know what he's doing. Goofy's eyes finally open. Oh, there you are. Goofy jumps straight up since there's just a random organization member standing over him. Axel tells him to take it easy and, quote, dabs a potion on Goofy's head. Is that how potions work? They're applied directly to the forehead? They're applied directly to the forehead? They're applied directly to the forehead? Goofy asks who this guy is, and Axel uses his new second favorite quote, I'm not telling. Not only that, Goofy asks if he's not in the organization after all, and Axel responds with, again, not telling. Ignoring this, Goofy says, you smell like Pluto. What, that again? He tells him, Sora and the others went that way, Goofy, and the thought of Axel directly addressing Goofy by name is extremely unsettling to me. Goofy says, well, thanks, pal, and runs off. Jumping back in time to a few nights after the Radiant Garden meteor shower, Evan bursts into the lab to tell the others that there's a visitor from somewhere else, adding, apparently there really are other worlds. Xehanort asks what that means, and Evan continues, someone calling himself the king of one of those worlds came to visit Master Ansem. And from his appearance, racist, it's obvious he is indeed from another world. Said his name is Mickey, I believe. Ienzo says, so the opening of the door affects the worlds. Xehanort leads Evan to go see what's up with this visitor. We cut back to Sora arriving in the Crystal Fissure, skipping over the Final Fantasy Ravine fights. Goofy reunites with the gang, no major changes there, and the group proceeds into the Great Maw, where Mickey does still have his realization about who Xemnas is, but here we have all those additional Radiant Garden scenes built around it, which I think is a nice touch. That Mickey and Ansem convo, followed by Xehanort getting shut down, plays out as usual, and we cut back to our heroes charging into the hordes of Heartless. But to further expand on that Mickey flashback, we again cut back to Xehanort all those years ago, pondering what he overheard from Ansem and Mickey's conversation. To summarize, he knows about a key called the Keyblade that can open any door, a material known as gummy blocks that allow people to travel the oceans between, and something about women known as the Princesses of Heart. Evan asks Xehanort what he heard, and Xehanort, like anyone with self-respect, ignores Evan. Xehanort asks Alias where the girl is, and he says she's sleeping. The narration says, the girl was very particular, unique among people. They had not been able to create any Heartless using her heart, perhaps because she was too young, or perhaps... Xehanort disappeared into the capsule room. I didn't at all expect what is potentially a written prelude to this Melody of Memory cutscene in my XIII novel, so that was pretty cool. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, but when we rejoin SDG, the Battle of 1,000 Heartless is already over, with just a brief line about Sora having no idea how many Heartless he'd taken down. I get that you can't really convey a kind of long gameplay segment in a book super easily, but it was a bit of a bummer that they didn't really try to adapt it in some way. Everything with Xemnas in the following scene plays out without anything of note, and Axel shows up to do his whole shtick. We do get a quick line from Goofy in the midst of this, thinking to himself, isn't this the same fella who just helped me out? There's also some inner thoughts from Sora, where he's actually able to figure out Axel's name without being told it, thanks to both a natural intuition, and Saïx mentioning that he was trying to find someone with that name. This is followed by the usual exchange about Axel having kidnapped Kairi. Then all of the Saïx and Maleficent stuff goes down without any substantial change. The trio gets swallowed up by Maleficent's portal, Leon and Cloud see the flash of light from a distance, and SDG end up in the void. Only real change in this sequence is that SDG find themselves piled on top of each other here, which kinda feels like a callback to the opening moments of Neverland in KH1. After the gang escapes the void, we get a classic Riku brooding scene, just him standing in the darkness from a distance, watching over the trio, bemoaning the fact that he can't see Sora right now because he's so hideous. He hopes Sora could figure out the secret of the two objects he left behind before Riku leaves the void as well. Pretty quick chapter there as we move on to chapter 3, titled The Land of Dragons. Of course, we don't just start there, as we've got to check in with Naminé back in Twilight Town. She's typing at the computer alongside Axel, trying to look things up, but without much success. They're joined by Riku, who asks what they ought to do before grabbing a popsicle out of the freezer and taking a bite. Axel remarks, is it good? Seriously, you're like a little kid, even though you look like a mean old man. Very funny in hindsight, considering Axel has eaten Riku's weight in ice cream and then some. Riku ignores Axel, with the narration saying that the comment did rub him the wrong way, though Riku supposed Axel was definitely at least a bit older than him mentally, not that you could tell from looking. Riku asks what the organization might be up to now, and Axel responds that if he were in charge, he'd be working on getting Sora to replenish the ranks and destroy Heartless at the same time. Riku asks how, and Axel says by finding someone powerful and turning them into a Heartless, thus also producing a nobody, while Sora would need to take down the Heartless as well. Naminé thinks she might know where someone powerful might be, but doesn't really elaborate on that, so thanks Naminé. Thank Naminé. Axel steals Riku's ice cream from him, and Riku says, "Just get your own, and you call me a little kid." After the usual scene of SDG aboard the gummy ship, we check in with the surviving organization members minus Axel. Xigbar says, "So, Demyx is no more. So sad." Although without any emotion on his face. Xemnas says that everything is going to plan, so, get fucked, Demyx, I guess. He instructs Saïx to eliminate Axel and for the other three to turn great hearts into heartless, and let Sora defeat them. It's at this point that I realize the novel is primarily including Disney worlds with organization involvement, besides space paranoids and one other exception we'll see later. Xigbar comments, "Change a great heart into a heartless, and you might end up with an extra useful nobody. Leave it to our fearless leader to figure out how to replenish our personnel." Interesting that they've made a point of this twice now in the novel, considering nobody ever talked about outright replacing the dead members in the game. We then find the gummy ship landed at the foot of a mountain in the Land of Dragons, with Sora super hyped to see snow for the first time. They walk through some wooded hills and reach the burned village, with Goofy wondering if the organization is responsible. They see a hooded figure run off, but before they can give chase, they're stopped by Mulan, currently in disguise as Ping, alongside Mushu. So this is basically a fusion of the two opening cutscenes for both Land of Dragons visits. Since Mushu didn't appear in the KH1 novel, he introduces himself here, and they go through the whole "you're a girl" song and dance, and Mulan figures she doesn't have to keep the disguise up anymore. So the whole Ping thing is just dropped immediately, and I'm not sure why they even kept it for the novel. Anyway, they all join up to run after the mysterious figure. But you, the reader, catch up with him first as we switch to Riku's perspective as he's running through the mountain snow, stopping at a rocky ridge. He realizes Sora saw him, but that he probably didn't know it was him, even if he did see his face. Riku also thinks about how this is the first time he's seen snow. He thinks to himself, it might be fun to play around in this snow with Sora. Pretty childish, but, well, nothing wrong with that. Riku smiles to himself, but then the mountainside rumbles and he can see a swarm of Heartless coming at him from the summit. He thinks he might get his wish after all. Back with SDG and Mulan, they're climbing through the snow as Sora mumbles, "I heard snow was cold, but it's really cold." I'd say he should ask Donald to magic up a coat, but we know that he won't. Sora also thinks to himself that it'd be fun to play with Riku and Kairi in the snow, just a funny little difference there. This transitions into the scene right before the Riku and Rapid Thrusters battle, and eventually Sora finds himself separated from the rest of the party, fighting the man in black. Sora notices that something feels strange as he fights the cloaked figure, and realizes that he's cutting down the Heartless too, giving him the sense that the man is actually helping him. Nevertheless, he attempts to attack Riku, but he easily dodges, sending Sora face first into the snow. Sora spits out some slush and says, "Hey, what gives? You better not be making fun of me!" Love the concept of Riku just rage-baiting Sora for fun here. Sora thinks to himself that despite supposedly fighting an organization member, he's having fun. He manages to get a good hit in, sending Riku to the ground on his back. Riku gets up and runs away, while Sora realizes that this fight reminded him of his spars with Riku back on the island. The usual cutscene plays out, and the novel actually describes the Storm Rider, which was nice after usually just hearing about generic, descriptionless Heartless. It may go without saying since the Storm Rider has appeared, but Shan Yu is nowhere to be seen in the novel, leading me to wonder if the village was burned down by someone or something else, or if it was still him and we're just gonna leave Mulan to contend with it on her own. We briefly get a glimpse of Riku totally owning Captain Shang so we can get a word with the Emperor, but nothing crazy before we switch back to SDG in the Imperial City. They fend off a mob of Heartless like in the game and head into the palace, although without having to climb the big pole. They run into the guy who's not Riku, Xigbar, who summons a bunch of dusks before disappearing. The party fights off the nobodies, featuring a blizzard from Donald. He's really mixing it up nowadays. All the while, Sora can't shake the feeling that the man he saw earlier was Riku and wonders why he's dressed that way and didn't say anything to him. The gang makes their way into the throne room, warning Shang and the Emperor of the giant Heartless. Nothing much of note until we get to the Storm Rider battle. They actually depict Sora being shot up into the air by gusts of wind like in the game. Sora instructs Donald to use his magic while Mulan and Goofy grab onto the Storm Rider's tail. Donald shoots out a blizzard spell while the rider shakes Goofy off, sending him flying into the pavement. Poor guy's had a bad day as far as injuries go. Donald runs to tend to Goofy while Sora grabs onto the rider's horns and then straight up stabs it in the head and jumps off. How he did this with the dull as hell Keyblade, I do not know. This ends up killing the Storm Rider, who, unlike in the game, falls into the palace's roof, sending a bunch of tiles flying into the air. Shang dashes in to protect Mulan from the debris, actually taking a few hits to the armor instead of getting bailed out by the Storm Rider's despawn animation. We then get the throne room scene with the Emperor with no major changes, and that's it for Land of Dragons. So again, not sure why they even had Mulan dressed up as Ping if they weren't gonna do anything with it, or have Shang find out. This sorta just boiled down to meeting Mulan and then watching her and Shang get together, but honestly, I'll take anything to keep these Disney chapters moving. Before the chapter properly ends, we shift over to Axel, Riku, and Naminé just hanging out in the mansion's parlor to kill some time. They're all armed with sea salt ice cream, and Axel comments that Riku seems to be in a pretty good mood. "Seeing Sora just made you that happy, huh?" Stealing Axel's line, Riku responds, "I don't feel like telling you," as a smile crosses his face. "You know, it's creepy when you smile with that guy's face." After an awkward silence, Axel inquires, "What is Sora to you?" And holy fuck, Axel, do you have any idea what you've just done? I can see the fireworks at Tumblr from here. I shit you not, the narration says, the question caught Riku off guard. He groped for words. Now, why are we groping? Where's the need for groping? Naminé chimes in that Sora and Riku are best friends. Axel thinks of his own best friend, and Naminé continues, "If your friend goes away, you're sad, and if you get to be with them, you're happy. Isn't that how it is, Axel?" He responds, "That's about the size of it." Riku says, "So you are capable of sincerity." Axel shrugs and eats his ice cream. Moving along, we've got Chapter 4, Beast Castle. We start off in the gummy ship, with the gang considering what the Emperor said about Riku. Specifically, Goofy is whispering to Donald about it, asking what Sora's gonna do if Riku really is with the organization. Sora overhears them and says if he is, it's fine. Donald protests that it's not fine because these are the guys who kidnapped Kairi. Sora retorts that Riku tried to help Mulan's world, so he can't be working against them. Goofy reasons that Axel's in the organization but helped him out. Sora and Donald are like, "What the hell, you never told us about that." Goofy explains he helped him back in Hollow Bastion after he fucking died. Sora thinks back to how he felt when he saw Axel back in Hollow Bastion, and the names Hayner, Pence, Olette, and now Axel ring in his head. And Roxas as well. Donald points out that Axel kidnapped Kairi, but Goofy reminds him that he did say sorry. The trio agrees to keep going and hopefully find out more. Back in the old mansion's computer lab, Naminé, Riku, and Axel have been trying and failing to get any useful information out of the computer. Riku notices that Naminé has drawn a picture of a fearsome beast in her sketchbook. Naminé asks if it's someone Riku knows, and he says that he's met him before, because the drawing is of capital B Beast. I guess Naminé has some of Kairi's memories of briefly seeing him back when she woke up in Hollow Bastion. Axel comments that the beast looks strong, and Riku confirms this to be true, though he did whoop his ass back at the Rising Falls. Naminé says that someone this strong wouldn't just do what the organization wants, and Axel says, "Well, this is their chance to show how persuasive they can be." We cut over to Beast Castle, not with SDG, but Beast and Zaldin. This is their in-game scene from the first visit, but instead of culminating with SDG and Cogsworth fighting Beast, we switch perspectives again once Zaldin vanishes. Over in a different part of the castle, SDG have arrived, which is depicted as pretty much the same as the world's first cutscene in the game. When they hear the Beast roar, instead of meeting up with and getting bullied by him in the parlor, they find him atop the entrance hall staircase. However, Beast completely ignores them, prompting them to go see if Belle is feeling more talkative. The trio makes their way through the castle, and they notice light underneath a door. Goofy wonders aloud if anyone is on the other side, and the wardrobe replies, "Patience please, the Mademoiselle is dressing." Belle then asks, "Beast, is that you?" You know, because Goofy and Beast have pretty similar voices. Belle opens the door and reunites with the trio, only giving a curtsy instead of crushing Donald's ribs like in the game. Beast appears behind them and says that tonight is very important. Belle takes Beast's arm and they just leave, which I thought was kind of rude. SDG figured that they may have come at a bad time, but follow them nonetheless. They end up in the ballroom, also populated by, as the book puts it, a middle-aged man turned clock, a maitre d' candelabra, a teapot maid, and a cup who was a little boy. Narration doesn't get much more omniscient than that. Goofy just comments, "What a funny castle," which is G-rated Disney speak for, "What the fuck is going on here?" Anyway, we have indeed fast-forwarded all the way to Zaldin's intrusion on the second visit as he crashes the party, leaving the group to fend off the swarm of nobodies he leaves behind. As they fight, Sora is reminded of fighting alongside Beast in Hollow Bastion and against Riku. He feels as though he learned a lot from the Beast back then. The subsequent post-battle scenes and Beast crash out in his room are unchanged. SDG join the servants in the hallway, and the text bubble scene where they explain the power of the rose is expanded to also explain the curse in general, which in-game is explained in the dungeon on the first visit. The following scene of Sora convincing Beast to buck the hell up is basically the same, though Beast refers to Zaldin as that stranger instead, so I guess they're not on a first-name basis like in the game. On their way back to the entrance hall, the party notices that the castle is now crawling with Heartless, which it notably wasn't up until now, unlike in the game, for whatever reason. They fight through the mobs and make their way to the castle entrance, confronting Zaldin, who introduces himself by name here after Sora just refers to him as the organization. After Xaldin explains that he wants Beast's Heartless, Nobody, and phone number, Sora actually leaps up to attack Xaldin, but he dodges and sprints out into the courtyard, unlike in the game where he very slowly walks out the door while they stand there and watch. Belle's kidnapping plays out like usual, we get the Bell Bow, and we transition into the Xaldin boss fight. Sora again leaps into the air to attack Xaldin, but he's thwarted by his lances and gusts of wind that sent him to the ground. Goofy runs over to give him a potion. Beast manages to break through and get a good hit in on Xaldin, and Donald follows up with not one, not two, but 3 consecutive thunders. If only he said "I got it" over and over like in the game. The spells only manage to hit the lances, leaving Xaldin unharmed. Then, weirdly, before another whirlwind strikes Sora, the wind turns into a cloud of black fog, causing Xaldin's lances to scatter. More on this later. Everyone involved in the battle is confused, but Sora and Beast take the opportunity to gang up on Xaldin, eventually putting him down. He does his big boy scream and fades away, Beast and Belle make up, do a little dance, and that's Beast Castle. Side note, we get our first illustration of this volume outside of the art and character bios at the front of the book, and this depicts SDG watching Beast and Belle dance in the ballroom with Goofy playing the piano. This is the only picture I've seen in these books so far that doesn't depict something that actually happened in the game or the novel's text, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Before the chapter concludes, we actually pan upwards, or at least we would if this wasn't a book, to the castle's rooftops where Axel and Riku are looking down at the group. Axel seems impressed that they managed to take down Xaldin without their help, though Riku says, maybe. The narration continues, Sora and the others had managed to defeat Xaldin, but Riku had not managed to just stand there without doing anything to help. So I guess he was the source of that weird mystery fog. The narration also explains that unlike when Heartless fall, Nobody's turned to darkness and evaporate into nothing. Quote, the sight was like watching Axel's own future unfold. It rattled him. Shaking off the mini-existential crisis, Axel says, what now? Head back and report to Naminé? Riku wonders aloud where SDG will be going next. That's anybody's guess. I'd like to at least know where we're going next. Axel leaves through a corridor and Riku follows. And so begins Chapter 5, titled Disney Castle. We open with Maleficent and Pete in Hollow Bastion. This is actually the scene that in-game plays in Timeless River after the gang views the first strange window. Back with SDG on the gummy ship, they pull up to a world with a big white castle and blue rooftops, prompting Donald and Goofy to exclaim that it is, in fact, Disney Castle, their home. They hug and dance around, and Sora says, so that's where you guys come from. Until now, he thought they were from Ohio. In the castle hangar, the first scene plays out as usual until Donald cracks open the door into the courtyard and notices all the Heartless roaming about. They comment, I sure hope Daisy's okay, and the Queen too. What about all the broomstick servants? Marking the first time in the series that anyone gave a shit about the enchanted brooms. Sora pushes through them and tells them that they need to go check on the Queen, per Chip and Dale's request. They fight their way through the garden and colonnade, eventually reaching the library. Their meeting with Minnie is mostly the same, but ends with the slight change of Donald worrying about Daisy's whereabouts in the castle. Goofy explains that Daisy is, quote, Donald's special sweetheart, lifting dialogue from the post-Timeless River cutscene in the game. Sora volunteers to go warn everyone in the castle, and Donald retorts that he'll get lost, like in the game, but Sora then teases Donald, claiming that he's just saying that because he wants to go see his girlfriend. Donald tells him to be quiet, followed by D&G taking off, leaving Sora with Minnie. In the colonnade, upon seeing the room filled with Heartless, Sora asks Minnie if she can run, and she says yes, which, debatable. Might be faster to push that mouse. When surrounded, we actually see Minnie cast Holy by name, which the narration clarifies is the word of a spell in case the big burst of light wasn't enough of a context clue. They fight their way through the remainder of the colonnade and then the audience chamber, eventually reaching the Hall of the Cornerstone. Minor note, but when Maleficent shows up, instead of calling Sora the Keyblade holder, she refers to him as the wretched Keyblade boy, which hits much harder.
Wouldn't you like to know?
Keyblade boy. What makes matters better, the full quote is, if it isn't the wretched Keyblade boy and his lackeys. To which Donald responds, we're not lackeys, indirectly implying that Sora is, in fact, a wretched Keyblade boy. When she disappears, instead of calling Maleficent a hag, Sora just says, ooh, she's the worst. After that, it's business as usual in the lead up to opening the door to the past and us turning the page to Chapter 6, Timeless River. Once we reach the pseudo-battle against Captain Pete, Donald basically defeats him with a singular fire spell apparently targeted at Pete's ass as depicted in the accompanying illustration. The next chunk is pretty straightforward, with SDG eventually coming across a window that leads to Mickey's house filled with Heartless like in the game. After clearing them out, they view just one scene of Maleficent and Pete in Hollow Bastion, which combines 2 in-game scenes together, revealing Maleficent's plan for the Cornerstone. Once the gang catches up with Modern Pete, SDG and Captain Pete actually manage to jump onto the deck of the steamboat as Modern Pete attempts to make his escape. Goofy ends up losing his balance and crashing into Bad Pete, sending him into the river. Sora celebrates a little before realizing Pete has swam to shore and is running away, so they give chase. Effectively, this whole sequence just replaced the battle with Pete on the steamboat where you have to hold on to the crane. At the wharf, the party easily defeats Pete in only a few lines, featuring a Keyblade strike from Sora, a shield bash from Goofy, and a thunder spell from Donald. Pete goes back to the present, and the fight is over, with no change of scenery or even a hint of a rowdy rumble. And this chapter was probably the most faithful to the game so far, as everything after this is clockwork. I will note that despite the novel pulling a lot of dialogue from the Japanese script, it doesn't include Daisy spanking Donald, which was cut from the English releases of the game. The party says goodbye to the Disney denizens, and we move on to Chapter 7, Port Royal. But we can't actually go right to Port Royal, we first have to check in with Naminé and Axel in the White Room. Although honestly, these are the best bits of the book, and I truly wish the game had at least a few more interstitials like this in between its barrage of Disney worlds. Anyway, Naminé's drawing some garbage, and some secret garbage at that, because she won't tell Axel what it is when he asks. Axel just goes, "Oh," and keeps watching her like he did back in Castle Oblivion. Some things never change. Though he thinks about how the both of them had changed since then, and overall he figures that he especially has changed for the better. Naminé observes that Riku has been gone for a while, and that she also doesn't, quote, sense Maleficent there anymore, so he ought to be back. Yes, you heard that right, Riku also traveled to Disney Castle to babysit Sora from the shadows as well. Axel comments that Riku worries too much, thinking he has to go help Sora with everything. Changing the subject, he asks if Naminé still wants to try and meet Kairi. Naminé says she has to help her, but Axel wonders if that's the best thing. Naminé says it's the right thing. She returns to her drawing, which is of her, Axel, and Riku smiling together. Back with SDG, they've arrived in Port Royal. Donald comments that he's never seen an ocean like this before, and that's probably because these guys are used to oceans looking like blue Kool-Aid. The start of the world is again a bit of a first and second visit mashup, as the trio immediately hears Elizabeth scream and they run off to find her surrounded by a bunch of undead pirates. Sora tells her to run and hide, and the gang attempts to fight the pirates, but fail thanks to their buff from the curse. Jack shows up and advises them that their attacks won't work right before the clouds part and the pirates are bathed in moonlight, revealing their true skeletal forms. Jack explains that they're undead and suggests he and SDG show them how alive they are. He asks Sora's name, Sora replies, and Jack says, "Here goes, Nora." Sora corrects him, and 2 lines later, as they're fighting, Jack says, "A little assistance, Dora." After a little work, the party manages to slay all the pirates. Jack then explains the curse of the medallions to SDG, and Elizabeth comes out of hiding to ask them for help, as her friend Will has gone to Isla de Muerta to investigate what's going on with the cursed treasure and the undead pirates. After a bit of convincing, Elizabeth gets Jack to agree to head for Isla de Muerta. Switching back over to the White Room, Riku has returned from his babysitting shift. Riku asks Naminé where Sora went next, and she shows him a picture of her drawing, which depicts a ship. Axel interjects, asking if they ought to be trying to help Kairi. Riku asks if he has any idea as to how to do that, and Axel replies, "Yep, I'm going to betray you two." You know, give him the old Axel dazzle. Riku says, "I'm not following." Axel explains, "They think you and Naminé are the wrench in their works, so I'm gonna tell them where you are." Riku responds, "You're going to make it look like you're betraying us. You really think that'll work? If I go back into the fold, I'll be able to come and go to their castle whenever I want. Then it'll be a cinch to get Kairi out." Riku asks what they should do in the meantime, and Axel says to finish off any organization member that comes here. "You were able to defeat Roxas. You can handle any of the others, except Xemnas. There are only 4 left, one of them is probably trailing Sora right now. And I seriously doubt Xemnas would come all the way out here himself. So you'd be up against Cyax or Xigbar, or Luxord, and you can take any of them. Once there's one less member in the castle, I'll come back with Kairi. How's that for a plan?" Unironically, I think this was the longest piece of uninterrupted dialogue in all of the KH novels I've read so far. Riku says, "You think you can pull that off?" Axel replies, "You can at least pretend to have a little faith in me." "I don't. No matter what you believe, I don't have much faith that a guy who let Kairi get kidnapped out from under his nose, lost a fight, and nearly disappeared is going to be strong enough for this." Damn, Riku, stop, he's already dead. Axel asks if Riku has any better ideas, and of course he doesn't. Axel then says, "You know, I don't mind disappearing. Roxas is gone. When we bring Kairi here, Naminé will be gone too. So, same for me." Naminé mutters, "We don't disappear, we're only reborn." Axel says, "I'm not like you and Roxas. It's because I don't have a heart. I don't want to disappear, but I'm not upset or sad about it." Not touching any of this with a 6-foot pole cannon, Riku agrees to follow Axel's plan. "If it starts going bad, just run for it. You're pretty fast, right? Well, faster than you anyway." Naminé calls to Axel as he gets up to leave, and he says, "Don't worry, Naminé. I'm the fastest the organization had. If I run, they'll never catch me." I didn't realize Axel had a maxed out speed stat until the novels. Naminé nods, and Axel says bye. A tear rolls down Naminé's face as he leaves. Back in Port Royal, the party is now on the Black Pearl, they spot Will on the Interceptor, they get him on board, yada yada. Eventually we get the party back on deck when Luxord shows up and he does summon the Grim Reaper, marking a whopping 2 unique Heartless showing up in this novelization. As the party leaps into action to fight it, we cut away to the Round Room, only populated by Xemnas, Xigbar, and Saïx. Xigbar wonders aloud if Luxord can handle Sora and then asks Saïx what the status is on Axel. Saïx says he can't find him and Xigbar responds, "Were you looking?" Xemnas announces Axel has returned, and sure enough, there he is, standing in the middle of the room. Axel says it's good to be back while holding his half-eaten ice cream. Saïx summons his claymore, asking what this foul traitor is doing here before Xigbar stops him. Saïx asks, God, this is tough. Saïx asks Axel what he's here for. Well, if I stay out there, Sora'll get me too. Anyway, it looks like you're having a personnel shortage. How are you gonna get a hold of Kingdom Hearts like this? Xemnas is amused by this, stating, "There is a reason you've returned." Axel says he's here to tell them where Naminé is. Saïx is skeptical, saying that they already know he's been working with Naminé and, quote, that other boy. Axel just straight up says that he's betraying them, and Xemnas starts chuckling to himself. Saïx and Xigbar look at him like he's a nut, and eventually he stops laughing and reinstates Axel into the organization. Axel tells Xemnas that Naminé and the boy are in the Twilight Town Old Mansion. Saïx volunteers to go after them, but Xemnas declares he'll go instead. Oops, it's the one guy Axel said Riku couldn't defeat. Returning to SDG and Jack, they've defeated the Grim Reaper off-page, and we get the Parley scene with Luxord, though Goofy never says barley, sadly. Eventually, the Grim Reaper rises back up out of the ocean, with the narration describing it as uglier than before thanks to the effects of the curse. Unlike in the game, Luxord doesn't fire cannons at the party, he just leaves on the other ship with the Grim Reaper. Right before they leave, the wind blows a bunch of the gold pieces into the air, with the Grim Reaper swallowing all of them. The party then notices that Jack has gone skeletal, and it's revealed that Donald palmed one of the medallions, though he says he was just trying to save it from going overboard. The remainder of this sequence is basically the party's conversation in the shipwreck graveyard from the game. Except Will and Elizabeth are still here, so they get dialogue that pulls from the cutscene right after gathering all of the Gambler medallions in the game, basically streamlining the second visit. So the gang is now heading back to Port Royal. In the meantime, Axel is walking in the castle that never was, internally freaking out a bit that Xemnas himself is going to Twilight Town and having no way to warn Riku and Naminé. He reasons that maybe with Riku in Ansem's form, he might have the strength to stand a chance. Axel notices Saïx following him, the latter stating that he doesn't trust Axel, claymore in hand. Axel replies, "Trust? We don't even have hearts. How could we trust anyone in the first place? God, just kiss already." Axel heads off to his room, trying to think up a plan for dodging Saïx and smuggling Kairi out of the castle. Back at Port Royal's harbor, we get into the second Grim Reaper battle. Donald hits it with the fire, Goofy gets hit with a gust of wind and tossed into the sand, and the wind also scatters a bunch of gold pieces all over. True to the game, the party has to run around and gather the missing coins. As Jack holds the Reaper off while SDG are gathering, he says, "Quick now, Gala!" Really? It's Sora! Nominal aphasia aside, Sora gets some hits in on the Reaper once the gold is back in the chest, followed by Jack finishing it off with a sword strike to the head. Luxord shows up to congratulate them like in the game, and I half expected them to fight him too, because it truly makes no sense that he survives until the world it never was, but everything plays out like normal. Chest pushed into the sea, Jack denied the Keyblade, we all laugh, and since this is actually the first time the party's been to Port Royal, a gate appears and Sora shoots it with the Keyblade, unlocking the path forward. Before the chapter ends, we check back in with Naminé, who's sitting in the White Room crying while Riku peruses the art tacked up on the walls. Suddenly, he becomes aware of someone outside and tells Naminé to go hide in the pod room in the basement. Meanwhile, nobodies have gathered outside, surrounding the mansion. Before she leaves, Naminé asks Riku if he thinks nobodies have a home, somewhere they belong. Riku says he doesn't have time for the overly melodramatic dialogue consisting of vague existential questions, and that he could have sworn she's basically said this exact sentence at least 4 or 5 times in this novel already. Sorry, just getting a little burnt out on some of this. Nah, he actually says that there's no time to talk, but Naminé says this is the only time they have to talk. She asks if nobodies really have no hearts, but Riku interrupts her to intercept a nobody that's lunged at her. Xemnas then warps into the room and says, "It's been a long time since I've seen that face." Riku plans to hold Xemnas off long enough for Naminé to escape. Xemnas addresses Riku. "Riku, or rather, Ansem. No, not Ansem either. Perhaps I should call you Xehanort. Well, don't you feel more at home in that form?" Riku responds, "The opposite, actually." Xemnas chuckles and says, "Perfect. On your guard." He summons the ethereal blades and they clash with Soul Eater as the chapter and Volume 3 comes to a close. Our fourth and final volume of the KH2 novelization is titled Anthem-Meet Again / Axel's Last Stand. If there's one thing you can count on Kingdom Hearts for, it's a snappy title. The first chapter is titled Radiant Garden, though we begin in the usual spot with Hayner, Pence, and Olette. They're discussing how it makes no sense that there's 2 money pouches and 2 blue crystals. Pence surmises that there must be a copy of Twilight Town, which is where the duplicate items came from, and that the things that aren't here are there. Olette asks, so in the other world where Sora got these, maybe that's where Kairi is. Hayner declares Pence a genius, though they lament that they have no idea how to get to this other town. This sequence was basically a remixed earlier version of the cutscene outside the old mansion right before you fight the nobodies alongside Mickey. Back in the White Room, Riku is fending off Xemnas' attack, and I have to point out that this is no place for a boss fight. This is more cramped than Lock, Shock, and Barrel in KH1. Xemnas taunts Riku, saying, Xehanort's power should be greater than this. Suddenly, Naminé calls out for Diz, and sure enough, he's appeared out of nowhere standing behind Xemnas. Ah, now I see. Diz calls Xemnas' name, but Xemnas just smiles and disappears. Riku says, maybe you were trying to help, but you ruined my chance to take him down, before turning his weapon on Diz. The gummy ship returns to Hollow Bastion, which I guess needed a gate from Port Royal opened in order to come back here, don't think too hard about it. Sora notices Heartless wandering around, confused that they're still here after, the battle where he killed 1,000 of them. Sora takes out some nearby Heartless, and Goofy comments that he's gotten pretty strong. Sora says he always was strong, and Donald, the goat, replies, nah, not really. Goofy concedes that Sora wasn't that strong when they first met, with Donald adding that he was kinda helpless back then. Before the roast can continue, Scrooge spots them, armed with 3 popsicles. He's finally gotten the flavor right, so naturally the gang gives it a try, and guess the fuck what, folks, it's salty, but also sweet. Wow, it's familiar. It reminds Sora of sitting with the others, watching the sunset somewhere. But where? Sora grabs a second helping from the freezer, though Goofy warns him not to get a stomachache. Scrooge says that the rest of the town sadly isn't in the mood for ice cream, and asks if the trio wouldn't mind checking on Leon. For the record, this was all adapted from an optional text bubble scene, though with some added dialogue here and there. We briefly cut over to Ansem's study, where Leon is fighting off some Heartless with his gunblade before noticing a message from the MCP, ignorant users obey the MCP, on the computer screen. No changes at all for a bit. We get SDG back inside Space Paranoids, which I was a bit surprised to see considering the other Disney worlds being limited to 1 trip only. They save Tron from some Heartless and head for the IO Tower. We get a pretty faithful depiction of Merlin zapping Sid, alongside a fun little illustration on the opposite page, pictured here. After getting the disc from Leon, the party heads to the central computer mesa to deal with the MCP, and to my surprise, Sark actually shows up here after being absent from the first half of the novelization. Tron explains to Sora that Sark is the MCP's second-in-command and lover. I mean, just second-in-command. A fight breaks out, and SDG deal with the Heartless, while Tron totally owns Sark with his frisbee, giving Sora an opening to smack him with the Keyblade. The MCP tries to get Tron on his side, and when that obviously doesn't work, Sark becomes Big Sark, and the MCP puts up his big barrier panels all around him. Tron frisbees Big Sark in the head again, and go figure, Sora follows up with the Keyblade strike. The barriers whirl around and knock Donald and Goofy to the ground. Tron calls Sora over, stating that they have to feed the program into the MCP. Sora, quote, felt a mysterious power flowing into him before raising the Keyblade and shooting a beam of light into the MCP. Donald goes, wow, that's neat! The MCP fucking died. And I guess Sark too, I guess he died when Sora hit him in the head. They never brought him up after that. Anyway, hugs all around, Tron kills himself in the data hole, and we cut over to Yuffie and Aerith in the computer lab. Nothing too much of note here, we get the usual post-Space Paranoids 2 stuff, including Aerith revealing the town's original name of Radiant Garden. Except Yuffie steals Merlin's line about wondering how the town got a name as awful as Hollow Bastion. The chapter ends with, the light scattered into tiny glowing motes streaming through the streets as if they had welled up from springs throughout the town. And as that radiance filled the world, the glory of days gone by took shape before them, as did their hopes for the future. I thought that was kind of nice. That brings us to Chapter 2, titled Waiting for You. We pick back up with Axel in the castle that never was, waiting for the perfect moment to rescue Kairi. He wonders if now is the time since Xemnas is gone, but he worries about having to contend with the other 3 members. The narration says maybe he was discovering the emotion known as fear. Suddenly, the harbinger of plot arrives, it's Pluto! Axel, having learned his name, addresses Pluto thusly, which excites the mutt to the point of licking the ever-loving shit out of Axel's face. Ah, cut it out! Do you still smell the king on me? I guess Axel needs to shower a bit more thoroughly. He gave Pluto a good hug and pressed his cheek against his fur, and they both head deeper into the castle together. Back in Radiant Garden, SDG are enjoying some ice cream, mind you, Sora's 3rd ice cream today. Goofy wonders if the town will be okay, and Sora assures him that Leon and the gang are here to take care of it. Looking at the castle, Goofy is reminded of Beast and Belle and says he hopes they're doing alright. Donald thinks of another castle, sighing Daisy's name. Sora again assures them that they're all fine while thinking of Riku and Kairi, hoping the same goes for them. I also thought this was a nice little moment. Donald then realizes that they've had this ice cream before, not just when Scrooge let them sample it, but from the mysterious box in the void. This gets Sora thinking about the picture that came alongside the ice cream, and Goofy wonders how Hayner and his pals are doing. God, if I'm Pence or Olette, I am absolutely livid to be relegated to just Hayner's pals. Sora feels as if he's done this exact ice cream with friends ritual some other time, maybe with Hayner and said pals, or maybe someone else, but he isn't sure. Sora decides he wants to go see them, and the trio takes off for Twilight Town. We then switch over to Twilight Town, but with Hayner and his pals before SDG show up. From the sound of it, we're near the bulletin board at Station Heights. Pence and Hayner are arguing about where Kairi might be, while Olette stands off to the side, hoping that Kairi is okay, while gazing at the money pouch she made. We actually get a weird but appreciated Olette lore dump, as the narration informs us that she worked hard on the embroidery of the pouch and was taught by her mother. We also learn that she doesn't have any good friends who are girls who would care about something like embroidery, and Hayner and Pence certainly don't get it. But Olette feels like Kairi could have been a good friend for her. Why did this make me feel sad? I didn't expect to learn that Olette not only has a mother, but a distinct lack of girlfriends. Anyway, Cypher and his pals show up, and he asked, "Standing around wasting space like always, huh?" Hayner basically tells him to fuck off, but Cypher tells them that some weird guys are hanging around at the old mansion. He goes on to explain that those silver things that kid Sora got rid of and a guy all dressed in black have been showing up over there. Cypher then does fuck off. Pence mutters that this sounds like it could be another wonder of Twilight Town. Hayner retorts that his last wonder was a real masterpiece, referring to the fluttering curtains at the mansion. Olette thinks Cypher might be telling the truth, reminding them that the guy who kidnapped Kairi was wearing all black. Olette and Hayner's pals piece together that the way to the other Twilight Town might be located in the old mansion, and they run off in its direction, leaving Hayner to catch up. Back in the White Room, we rejoin Naminé, Riku, and Diz, with the latter still staring down the sharp end of Soul Eater. Naminé tells Riku to knock it off, and he lowers his weapon. Riku says, "Still after revenge, aren't you, Ansem the Wise?" Ansem replies, "Not exactly." Riku responds, "Well, isn't that nice for you? You had us do the dirty work, and now you can play dumb." Ansem remarks that Riku and Naminé are the ones who left, though it didn't come as any surprise. What's also not a surprise is that Ansem brought ice cream. Riku is insulted by the gesture and asks if Ansem is making fun of him, but Naminé's like, "Ice cream is ice cream," and takes two from the old fuck. Ansem says he wants to apologize to them, stating he doesn't expect their forgiveness, but wants to express that he feels remorse and that he was wrong. He continues, "The darkness took advantage of the weakness in you, in your heart, but your indomitable hope kept it at bay. You made the darkness your strength, and..." Before Riku cuts him off, asking, "Is that all you came here for? To tell me this?" Ansem shakes his head. Naminé, Roxas, and Xemnas, the nobodies of those with strong hearts, are peculiar beings. That is, our theories proved fruitless. Coming into contact with a strong heart transforms a world. And not just worlds, but people themselves, and even nobodies. Naminé perks up a bit upon hearing these words from Ansem. Ansem tells Riku that his strength is something special, and he requests that Riku saves the world, adding that he'll do anything in his power to help him. Riku faces away from Ansem in silence as we switch back to the castle that never was. We rejoin Axel and Pluto, who have found Kairi in a cage suspended in a ceiling. For our purposes here, I'm just going to use her prison from the game. I don't feel like doing all that. Kairi seems at a loss for words, saying, "You?" Axel chimes in, "Axel, didn't you have it memorized?" He then apologizes for the whole kidnapping thing and opens a corridor, which Pluto jumps into. Of course, Saïx shows up for a rematch. "I've been waiting for you, Axel." "Kiss, kiss!" Axel promises Kairi he'll get her out of there, which pisses Saïx off, calling Axel a vile traitor as he summons his claymore. Axel grabs his chakrams and thinks to himself, "I don't want to disappear, but still it wouldn't be so bad if I did. Not here." They start fighting, but Axel thinks he can't defeat Saïx with only his own strength, but he refuses to hesitate, wanting to find the hope that Sora and Riku had. And then, quote, "The claymore pierced Axel's chest, and for a second I thought I was actually reading the manga." Thoughts rush through Axel's head. "I can't disappear now. I shouldn't have to disappear at all. Why am I doing all this? Who is it for? For Roxas, for Riku, for Naminé, and for myself. There are still things I should do, things I have to do." Saïx yells, "You will lose everything." Axel replies, "Maybe so, but I can run faster than any of you." He opens another corridor, escaping through it. Kairi calls out to him, and Saïx tries to follow him, but the portal closes, and he's long gone. Back with SDG in Twilight Town, they notice nobodies pouring out of the hole in the wall that leads to the woods. They make their way to the old mansion, fighting off nobodies along the way. Back in the White Room, poor Naminé is still holding those sea salt ice creams, and they're melting in her hand. As if he could smell his favorite food, Axel portals into the White Room to join them, clutching at his chest on account of the whole getting stabbed by Saïx thing. Wasn't really clear how severe the wound is, it just said it pierced his chest. Naminé fusses over him a bit, but Axel insists it's no big deal. He tells them to use the portal he came through to get to Kairi, though Naminé hesitates to leave Axel like this. She might be able to sense what one half of this volume's title is. Axel reminds her that she wants to meet Kairi, and that he needs to stay here to make sure Sora and his sidekicks can make it there too. With a tear rolling down her cheek, she thanks Axel and says farewell, heading to the corridor with Riku. Riku asks Ansem if he's coming with them, but Ansem says he has things to do here and urges them to go and rescue Kairi. Once Riku and Naminé leave, Ansem asks if Axel needs help with his wound, but nihilistic Axel restates that there's no point because nobodies aren't meant to exist. Besides, this way I'll finally get to see Roxas again. He opens another corridor for himself and says, "Well, I'm off, Ansem the Wise." Also, he tosses his ice cream stick, and for some reason they capitalize the word popsicle like it's the brand. We cut over to Mickey, who's just recently arrived in Twilight Town. The narration states he could sense someone here, many someones. Sora, Riku, Donald and Goofy, Naminé, Axel, and Ansem the Wise. Mickey says to himself, "Damn, these bitches stink!" Nah, I wish. The scent, however, does remind him of Traverse Town. I'm assuming he's just smelling plot consequences. It has a distinctly different smell from filler worlds. Suddenly, Mickey catches sight of a nobody and readies his Keyblade, making his way to the old mansion. Sora and his pals join up with Hayner and his pals, who are splayed out on the ground outside the mansion. This scene plays out normally, but Mickey pretty much solos the nobodies, and SDG don't really have to lift a finger. We rejoin Naminé and Riku, running through corridors of darkness, as Naminé thinks about how often she seems to do this, sometimes with Axel, sometimes with Riku. She also thinks about how someday the time will come when she won't get to do this anymore, wondering how much longer she has to exist. She thinks about what Axel will do now. And I swear to fucking God, if I have to read about Naminé asking herself why nobodies were born at all, or restating that they have no hearts, I'm going to pull a Fahrenheit 451. Anyway, that's where the chapter ends, just Naminé thinking existential thoughts. Chapter 3 of our last volume is titled Axel's Last Stand. I'm sure this'll go well for him. We start with SDG MHPO looking around the mansion's foyer and deciding to split up to investigate. Sora intuits where to go to reach the computer room, with his Disney pals wondering how he knew that. Sora doesn't know himself and says, "Just a guess? Gee, I wonder if it's on account of the Roxas of it all." Meanwhile, Axel is waiting in the shadows of the spaces between, which I take to mean the betwixt and between area where he's going to make his titular last stand. He thinks about how Saïx referred to him as a traitor, though it's not as if this only became true recently. His treachery began back in Castle Oblivion, when Marluxia and Larxene tried to make Sora their puppet. I wanted to point out that the novel actually uses the phrase somebody in the context of being opposite of a nobody. Not with a capital S, but it's something the games never do, it's only ever used by fans in that way. Axel thinks about how the organization is anything but organized. Just a ragtag group of nobodies who all want hearts, and that's the only unifying factor. It was only natural that conflict would occur between factions. We get confirmation from the narration here that Saïx did indeed deal a mortal blow to Axel as he mutters to himself, "Hurry up, Sora." Back in the mansion, as the party makes its way through the library, Sora feels a sense of familiarity, though Donald and Goofy remind him that when they woke up, they went right outside and never passed through this room. It is, honest to God, so tiring how much they focus on this deja vu shit with Sora. The game touches on it sometimes, but not to the point where it becomes so repetitive, because there is no intrigue when we already know exactly why Sora feels this way. If we didn't know the truth about Roxas already, this might be less exhausting, but it is just constant in the novel, for what reason I do not know. Unless when you're playing the game, you're not supposed to know that Roxas is Sora's nobody the whole time until the game outright tells you, but I've never met anyone who didn't know it before Riku revealed it in World Never Was, so this is not in the script, by the way. I'm just, trying to figure this out. We cut back over to Kairi in her cell, accompanied by Pluto, who's trying to comfort her. She wonders if Axel is okay and reassures herself that he, Sora, and Riku are coming to help her. She thinks about how she's seen Axel get hurt twice now for her sake, and that she's been unable to help him either time. Back in the old mansion's computer room, when Pence asks for the password, the trio announces Sora, Donald, Goofy, since that's the password for the computer in Radiant Garden. Pretty embarrassing when it doesn't work at all, but they eventually figure out that it's the ice cream flavor. Look at Hayner here. Once in a betwixt and between, when the swarm of nobodies appears, Axel mutters to himself, "Really, Saïx?" So I guess he sent this squad to go finish Axel off, or keep SDG from progressing, or both. I have to read this out-of-pocket line from when Axel and Sora are fighting side by side. He could feel Sora's heat against him, the hint of sweat. It reminded him of Roxas. Kanamaki, what are you doing? As they fight off the horde of nobodies, Axel is reminded of fighting alongside Roxas and wishes he could do so again. He wished they had talked more, about lots of things and nothing at all. But why do I feel this way if nobodies have no hearts? Gee, I wonder if fucking nobodies have fucking hearts. As Axel's doing his big die attack, he thinks to himself, the last of your strength, give it to me. Share with me the strength for the end, Roxas. I didn't realize that's how these things worked, but go off, King. I guess I'll read his dying thoughts because everything else is pretty much the same. I'll spare you from my bad voice as well. If I wake up, I hope I can see Roxas. I just want to see him again. No, I know I will. Roxas. Hey, wake up. Are you really in there? Didn't we promise we'd meet again in the next life? We were best friends, weren't we? A promise. We'll meet again in the next life. We did say that. I remember. I remember our promise. And then Axel fucking died. I do appreciate that when SDG meet up with Mickey once they're in the world that never was proper, they actually tell him what happened with Axel instead of just going on like nothing happened. Goofy tells him that Axel helped them, and Mickey says, "Oh, I've met him. Where'd he go?" Sora replies, "He helped us, and now he's gone." "You mean... oh no. They'll pay for this." "If only." Mickey says, "Gee, maybe Axel was trying to help us the whole time." The party is determined to go and find Kairi, but as they make their way further into the city, they're interrupted by nobodies, and suddenly Sora's vision starts to go blurry. We get the Sora and Roxas Mind Palace battle without any substantial changes. I'll point out some slight dialogue differences, but I don't really know if they're just adapted straight from the original Japanese or not. But Roxas refers to himself as a denizen of the dark, and upon defeat, he says to Sora, "You make a good somebody instead of a good other." This is followed by a pretty faithful version of the Roxas and Axel convo on the clock tower. We get the post-fight conversation with SDG, we see Kairi escape her cell, Riku reuniting with Kairi, all like in the game, and that brings Chapter 3 to a close. Chapter 4 also pulls from the overall volume title, as it's called Meet Again. We start with the big scene in the Hall of Empty Melodies, where Sora sees Kairi on the upper level of the room, and she gets her Keyblade. Was hoping maybe the novel might fill in some gaps regarding how Riku came into possession of Destiny's Embrace, but nothing of the sort, sadly. There's nothing super noteworthy here, but I wanted to point out that the novel uses the phrase Xehanort Riku in reference to Riku here, which I thought was kinda strange. We breeze through that sequence and the following cutscene between Mickey and Ansem the Wise, and resume with Xigbar showing up to confront SDG. His pre-fight taunting is a little different, as he doesn't mention the others like in the game, aka they got rid of the most interesting thing he says. Instead, he says, "Those blue eyes, they just give me such a thrill." Okay, let's get you to bed, Grandpa. "Let's dance, kiddo." Sora says, "You know, I don't have time for you." All the while, Xigbar is shooting at the party, and they're struggling to block all of his bullets, or knives of light as the novel calls them. Bullets is too grown up, I guess. Pissed off at being called Roxas, Sora knocks an arrow gun out of Xigbar's hand, Goofy smashes his shield into Xigbar's jaw, and quote, "A spell from Donald exploded in Xigbar's face," and then Xigbar fucking died. Seems like the novel is staying pretty on track with the game the further in we get, because I've got nothing to report on the SRK reunion scene, but I wanted to at least have a chance to show you this fighting Kairi art, so here's me talking for a little bit longer so you can look at it. There is also a funny line toward the end of the scene where Sora asks Donald and Goofy, "So, how about it? Are we ready for one last rumble together?" "Lah!" Donald agreed a bit louder than necessary. Like, okay, just fucking cook 'em, I guess. "Lah!" We get a short new scene with Naminé right after, where we see her looking down on the party from above, hanging out with Pluto. She notices that it's getting harder to breathe and her right hand looks hazy. She wonders aloud, I wonder if Roxas really managed to find his way back into Sora. She then thinks, when a nobody meets their somebody, that nobody will disappear. But not really, they just go back to the place they belong. Axel must have returned somewhere when he disappeared. I hope Roxas is there too. Seemingly sensing her feelings, Pluto whines at her, but Naminé assures him that she's okay and that she's not afraid, but there's still something she has to do. That brings us to Chapter 5, Way to the Dawn. It opens with Ansem the Wise pissing on the moon, and then switches over to the party making their way deeper into the castle before being intercepted by Luxord. No proof of existence to be seen, sadly. Like in the game, Luxord separates Sora from the rest of the party using his giant cards, but Sora calls out to Riku asking what to do. Riku basically tells him to believe in the heart of the cards, saying, "Reality isn't only what you see with your eyes. Feel out the truth. I know you can. Wake up, get out there. Truth is elusive, it's nowhere to be found. It's full moon again. Crazy how time flies." I may have editorialized some of that. Sora thinks to himself, if he only believed what he saw with his eyes, he never would have found Riku or known that Ansem Riku was Riku. As if boosted on the steroid that is friendship, Sora says, "There," and brings his Keyblade down onto one particular card. And, quote, behind that card was something of substance to strike. And then, Luxord fucking died. Sora assures the rest of the party that he's okay and that they should keep moving. Goofy says, "Gorsh, Sora's kinda showing off, don't you think?"
"Yeah, for Riku and Kairi."
"Hey, I can hear you guys!" Riku and Kairi look at each other and laugh. The party fights some Heartless as they progress further into the castle, just noting that because it's all nobodies once you reach the castle in-game, but I think it makes sense to have Heartless in here too at this point in time. Goofy wonders if they should really be destroying all these Heartless, but Riku says if they don't, they'll cut them down. Sora then says, "Say Kairi, where'd you get that Keyblade?" And I'm sitting here pulling my face closer to the book like, yeah, where did you get it? Kairi looks at Riku and, quote, Riku gave a tiny shake of the head as if he didn't know either. Fucking awesome. Goofy says, "So now Kairi and the king have Keyblades too, not just Sora." Donald says,
What, we aren't cool enough?
as he inspects Destiny's embrace. Sora wonders aloud, what is the Keyblade though, really? And a voice chimes in, "A key wielded by a chosen one, nothing more." By God, that's Saïx's music! Again! We get into his boss fight, and at some point I guess Donald learned Tier 3 magic again because he uses Thundaga here. Saïx blocks it, but it was a good try. We also see Saïx power up by sucking up some moon juice, and he even hits the all shall be lost to you during the fight. Donald manages to hit him in the chest with a Faraga, which sends him flying into a wall, ending the battle. Saïx cries to Kingdom Hearts, and then Saïx fucking died. As Riku reveals the nature of Sora and Roxas's connection, we briefly see Naminé watching on from the room's entrance, knowing now that Roxas has returned to where he came from. She puts her hand on her chest and feels the beating of a physical heart, affirming to herself, we nobodies are alive. I have to go back soon too, to where I can hear a warmer heartbeat. We move on to Ansem the Wise's big pre-death scene with some added inner monologue from Xemnas as he talks to his former mentor. You saved me when I wandered without memories. Or rather, saved Xehanort. If you hadn't found me that day and helped me, if you hadn't been studying the mysteries of the heart, things would have never come to this. Does that mean it was all inevitable? Or is it someone's will at work? A will greater than ours? Yada yada, Ansem fucking dies, and when the machine explodes with a blinding flash, we see Naminé clasping her hands together under the shower of light, seemingly praying for Sora and Riku to wake up. Riku returns to his true form, and Sora thinks to himself, I know we haven't seen each other for a year, but Riku's so much taller! No fair! We eventually reach the Pete and Maleficent scene, and when Mickey and Pete reunite, Pete thinks to himself, right, he used to call me Captain, back when this little guy was always scurrying around, giving me a headache with his mischief. Back then, I used to be great back then. I tried to do a Pete voice, I could not do it for more than like 2 words. I used to be great back then. That's the best I can do. As Pete and Maleficent charge into the swarm, so ends the chapter. And so begins Chapter 6, titled Anthem for Xemnas. It's like Mike Tyson is trading Union Cross medals or something. The chapter begins with some unattributed italic text, which I'm guessing is supposed to be Roxas. It's just your garden variety Kanamaki fluff about nobody's having or not having hearts. Here, I'll put it on screen, but I promise it isn't interesting. When the party confronts Xemnas at the Altar of Na, Sora's line about nobody's not even existing is changed to, all you do is throw around the power of darkness and use it to hurt people. So at least he comes off as a bit less racist here, though again, this might have been the case in the original Japanese, not sure. We get Sora and Xemnas' one-on-one battle in Memory's Contortion, complete with skyscraper parkour shenanigans. As he's running up the building, Sora thinks, huh? Did I fight someone before like this? Jesus Christ, we get it! Sora doesn't feel that confident fighting Xemnas alone, but his resolve steals when he remembers that his friends are with him in his heart. He defeats Xemnas, just for now of course, and we shift back to the rest of the party at the top of the castle. Riku wonders to himself where Xemnas could have taken Sora and thinks, just when we finally found each other and I was able to turn back into my real self. Sora, you can't leave me now. I feel like this book is basically turning into a holy text for a certain section of the fandom. Right after, Sora pops in from out of nowhere and things play out pretty normally. The party heads into the big old door provided by the worlds. But before we reach the other side, we hear some thoughts from Naminé. Please protect them, and the worlds. Wait, I want to ask the will of the worlds. What is it you want us to do? Why did you create us, the lost ones, the nobodies? Someone get this girl a new pack of colored pencils, she's running out of things to say. There's some funny dialogue once we pick back up with the party inside Xemnas' nothingness dimension. As they're running through the debris, Goofy almost falls and gets caught by Riku. Donald yells at Goofy to keep going, but then he loses his footing and slides right into Riku, who also snatches him up and keeps him from falling. Riku says, for guys who tag along with a hero, you two sure are a handful. Donald commands Riku to put him down. Sora makes his way to solid ground, and Donald and Goofy then come crashing down on top of him. Why do you guys always do that? Riku remarks, seriously, how did you three manage to survive this long? Riku then proceeds to smash the armored core in one strike, impressing even Donald. There's a reason the man has an ability called Dark Aura. We skip over the stunt dodge sequence, and instead the core opens to reveal armored Xemnas atop his throne. And folks, not to get all clickbait on you, but I was actually shocked by what happens next. To quote the novel, something strange happened. We get some italic text calling back to KH1, Sora saying, "What's happening to me? Falling into darkness." Sora's form was engulfed in a black substance. He hardly looked like himself anymore, more like a nobody. Sora dropped on all fours and pounced on Xemnas at an incredible speed, attacking ferociously. Donald, Goofy, and Riku are like, "Holy shit, what the fuck is going on?" Direct words from them, I swear. And Riku, quote, called to the pitch-black thing shaped like his friend, the Anti-Sora. And just like that, Sora reverts to his normal self. So yeah, despite never getting Dry Form stuff in the first volume, I guess Anti-Form is canon, at least in the novel. Weird though how it was described as being similar to a nobody instead of, you know, a Heartless, obviously. While he's trying to figure out what just happened, surprisingly, a water clone of Demyx comes charging at Sora, which I was also surprised they bothered to adapt, considering it's pretty easy to miss during the boss fight. Goofy knocks the clone out of the way, and Riku lands a decisive strike on Xemnas, followed by another from Sora. Xemnas lets out his big dramatic scream and returns to his shrimpy, non-armored form. And then Xemnas fucking died. Or did he? He didn't, but for now we celebrate. As Riku is being doomer about not being able to face the people back on the island, Sora hits the "like this" to cheer him up. He thinks about how even though he always lost in sword fights against Riku, he always won in staring contests. We do get the whole Roxas and Naminé reunion interspersed with a lot of extra thoughts from both of them, but folks, I'm not gonna lie, it's just the same stuff over and over. Nobodies don't disappear, they exist in memories, they made a promise to each other, they don't exist, will they see Axel again? Maybe, hopefully, did he really disappear? They won't disappear, they don't have hearts, or do they? They don't, but they do, holy fuck! Anyway, Dragon Xemnas is here, and he's pissed. We do, in fact, get Sora and Riku using the mysterious convenient sidecar ship thing, and during the flying and fighting, Sora says, "Actually, this is kind of fun." I'm glad someone had fun during this part. Riku says, "Of course you're enjoying this." Sora comments, "This thing is tough," and Riku says, "Well, it is our last enemy, right?" Yes, but also no. Riku pelts the dragon with lasers, while Sora jumps off the glider to smash its head with the Keyblade. The dragon crashes into the darkness below as a big storm envelops both it and Sora and Riku. In the middle of the storm is Xemnas, wearing his famous Moo coat. Unsurprisingly, we've skipped the second armor fight, and when Sora tells Xemnas that he's not eternal, Xemnas responds, "Perhaps no more eternal than that radiance you two bear." What? They're clearly not bears, they're human children. Anyway, the chapter ends with the line, "So the final battle was upon them." And the final chapter is upon us, titled, "Something You Could Never Imitate." The very first line is a slight variation of Xemnas' opening quote in the final battle. "Anger and hate reign supreme." As the fight breaks out, Sora asks Riku what they should do. He responds, "Just fight however you want, I'll cover you." Sora replies, "Oh, so you get to be the only one who looks cool." Glad his priorities are in order. As Xemnas uses his nothingness spaghetti vines and creates clones of himself, the novel actually pulls quotes from that second armor fight and uses them here. "Can you truly trust Riku?" Sora's like, "Why wouldn't I?" "Riku, aren't you jealous of Sora?" Riku doesn't even dignify that with a verbal response, instead choosing to slash at Xemnas' neck. "Who is controlling your hearts now? Sora, Riku. Can you say for certain that there are no delusions lurking within your hearts?" Channeling Roxas, Sora tells Xemnas to shut up and sends Xemnas flying into the air with an attack. Riku hits in midair, and they're juggling this motherfucker like the grandstander ball. But Xemnas retaliates with some lasers, followed by using his vines to ensnare Sora like in the game. Riku dodges Xemnas' vines and barriers of light, eventually freeing Sora from Xemnas' trap. But Xemnas then initiates his laser dome protocol, and I'm hoping the boys know about the triangle button in the novel. "Look upon the strength of my hearts. Fury, hate, envy, power of all hearts. Come to me. Give me sustenance." They manage to block a few of the lasers before the novel gives us a reenactment of this cinematic sequence from the very end of the fight. Xemnas lets out a "Cursed Keyblades." And then Xemnas fucking died. And unsurprisingly, since we have no more battles or extra Naminé or Axel scenes to check in with, the rest of the novel doesn't deviate too much from the game. We get some additional inner thoughts from Sora and Riku as they sit on the dark margin, but nothing terribly interesting or surprising. The post-Xemnas scenes and Kairi's letter are all what you'd expect, but we do get a little bit of extra stuff with Kairi on the beach, waiting for Sora and Riku's return. She looks out to sea, and Mickey reassures her that they're alright. She thinks back to the letter she wrote to the boy she couldn't quite remember. The narration states, she'd believed that letter would begin something. Why had she thought that? It was someone she'd seen in a dream. It must have been Sora. No, Roxas? Just then, Sora and Riku plummet into the ocean. As everyone reunites and Sora looks at Kairi, her words from a year ago echo in his or her mind. I'm making them so even if one of us get lost, we'll make it back here safe and sound, so the three of us will always be together. We're back, welcome home, we all cry, the end. But wait, there's more. We've got an epilogue titled You're Home. The first 4 pages, oddly enough, are excerpts from Secret Ansem Reports 1, 2, 6, 7, 11, and 13. Don't really know why they decided to just cram a bunch of them at the end of the book here, but cool, I guess. We cut to Sora in the secret place, and at first I thought this was fully invented for the novel before remembering that this is shown in the credit crawl at the end of the game. He thinks about how it feels like only yesterday when he drew the Paopu on the wall, but that it feels like 100 years ago when he saw the man in the cloak here. After noticing Kairi completed their drawing, he runs out onto the seashore, joining Riku and Kairi before reading their letter from the king. Sora hurried to pop out the cork and shake the letter free, then started reading right away. Riku smiled as he read it in turn, Kairi examined it anxiously. The setting sun shone gold on their faces. The end. Alright, so final thoughts. Well, you may have noticed that I started to get a bit frustrated and mean toward the end of this, and that's just me keeping it real with you guys because I'm not going to pretend to be enjoying myself when I'm not. I found the KH2 novel to get increasingly difficult to get through as I went on, but I also can't deny that it adds more than the KH1 novel did in terms of filling in gaps from the game, partly because there just are more gaps to fill by nature of how the games are laid out. I might have had a higher tolerance for the KH1 novel because that's my favorite game, and the COM novel was doing so much with Riku Replica in the 3rd volume. All of these new scenes are the obvious highlights of the KH2 novel, but I just didn't feel like that was enough to really hold my interest. Like, I'll be fully honest, this second part took so long to come out because it was like pulling teeth to sit through some of these chapters. They mercifully cut out the Disney worlds with no organization meddling, save for Space Paranoids and Timeless River, which at least have their own connections to the external KH2 plot. But even in keeping those worlds like Beast Castle and Port Royal, I still found those chapters to be a bit of a slog. I think Kanemaki's writing style also unfortunately started to grate on me by volume 3 or 4. There's just so much melodrama and reasserting the same points or questions over and over, I felt like I was going crazy reading some of the dialogue and inner thoughts. I don't want to give off the impression that this had absolutely no merit or was a waste of my time, because it was legitimately cool to see what Naminé, Axel, Riku, etc. were up to in between the Sora segments. But I guess I also can't really recommend picking up the novel to read it for yourself because I promise I've covered the most interesting bits for you already. But I mean, they look nice on a shelf, so don't let me stop you from getting them. Anyway, justice for Olette. KH4 Olette embroidery minigame. You heard it here first, it's happening. I called in a favor. That's what I'm using it on. Okay, outro time. Hey, thanks so much for watching. As Kingdom Hearts fans, you probably know that one of the hardest things that we can do is read. So if you appreciate my sacrifice and me leaving my comfort zone, please toss the video a like, subscribe if you're new, and if you really liked it, I got a Patreon at patreon.com/regularpat. I talked about this in a YouTube community post, but I miss just looking at the games, so next video, I promise you, will be focused on strictly the games. And thank you for your patience as I got part 2 out here. I'm not lying when I said that I'd pick up the book and I'd take way too many notes on each page. And I was like, man, some of these chapters are tough. But there's some gold in there. I'm glad that I did it. We got some good, insight on those gaps that you don't get covered in the game. So at least that's something. Thank you again to PJ for making not just the thumbnail, but so many assets for this video. So many little Union Cross-ified characters. PJ, my co-host of No Sad Face, a Kingdom Hearts podcast that we do. We're currently in our 2nd season. I think if my timing is right here, we just had an episode upload today. So all about lost content and lost media in the Kingdom Hearts series. So go check that out if you're not familiar with that. That's all. Hope you have a great rest of your day and night whenever you're watching this. And I will see you next time. Stay safe out there. Take it easy.